Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Nights. And tonight, we have a collection of fairy tales. A sorceress once had 3 sons who loved each other with brotherly affection. The old woman did not trust them. She thought they would rob her of her power. So she turned the eldest into an eagle who lived on top of a rocky mountain and was often seen whirling round in great circles or soaring high in the heavens. She changed the second son into a whale who lived in the deep sea. And at times there would be seen a mighty stream of water rising in the air, which the whale spurted up like a water sprout. Each of the brothers, however, had the privilege of resuming their own natural forms for 2 hours each day. The third son, who feared that his mother might turn him into a wild beast, such as a bear or a wolf, went away secretly from home. He had heard, also, that in a beautiful castle called the Castle of the Golden Sun lived a beautiful princess who was under the spell of the sorcerer, and he longed to set her free. He knew, however, that to do this, he must risk his life, for already 23 young men had met with most terrible deaths in the attempt. And since the last of that number fell a victim, none had dared to venture near the spot. But the young man's heart knew no fear. So he determined to go and seek the castle of the Golden Sun. He had been traveling for a long time without finding it, when he came to a great forest, in which he wandered about till he lost his way. All at once, he saw in the distance 2 giants who beckoned to him with their hands. And when he approached, they asked him what he was doing there. He told them that he had lost his way. "Oh," replied one, "we can soon show you. We know every corner of the forest. But you must help us in something first. We are both equally strong, and neither can overcome the other. And we have been fighting for a little hat, which is to belong to the one who conquers. Now, you little men are as clever as we are, and therefore we will let you decide who is to have it. How can I fight with you for an old hat? Replied the youth. Ah, they replied, you call it old. You don't know its value. It is what is called a wishing hat, and whoever puts it on can wish himself where he will, and in a moment he is there. Give me the hat, said the young man. I will go on a little way, and when I call you must both run a race to overtake me. And whoever reaches me first, to him that hat shall belong. The giants agreed, and the youth, taking the hat, put it on and went away. But he was thinking so much of the princess that he forgot the giants and the hat, and continued to go farther and farther without calling them. Presently he sighed, and he said, Ah, if I were only at the castle of the golden sun. The words were scarcely out of his mouth when he found himself on a high mountain, and before him stood the castle of the golden sun. He stepped in through the open door and went from room to room, till he came at last to one in which the princess sat. But how shocked he was when he saw her. She had a complexion as grey as ashes. Her face was wrinkled, her eyes dim, and her hair red. Are you the king's daughter, whose beauty is so renowned? He cried. Ah, she replied, this is not my own shape. The eyes of mankind can only see me in this hideous form and appearance, for I am under a spell. If However, you wish to know what I really am. You must look in the mirror, which never allows itself to be mistaken, but represents my image truthfully. She gave him, as she spoke, a looking glass, and he saw in it the representation of a beautiful maiden. As the world once knew her, with the tears of sorrow running down her cheeks. "Tell me how to set you free," said the young man. "I shrink from no danger." She replied, "Whoever can obtain a crystal ball and hold it before the sorcerer will destroy his power, and I shall instantly regain my proper form and freedom. But," she continued, "so many have already lost their lives in the attempt, and it really pains me to think that your young blood should flow if you venture to encounter such a dangerous undertaking." "Nothing shall hinder me," he replied. "Only tell me what I am to do." "You shall know all," said the princess. "Now listen. You must climb to the top of the mountain upon which this castle stands, and there you will find a wild buffalo standing by a spring. With him, you must fight, and if you are so fortunate as to kill him, a phoenix will rise out of his dead body. This creature you must also destroy, and in it you will find a red hot egg. And if you break it, instead of a yolk will be seen the crystal ball. But you must be careful not to let the egg fall on the ground. If you do, it will immediately ignite and burn up everything near it. The egg also will melt, and with it the crystal ball, so that all your trouble will be lost. The youth on hearing this, did not delay a moment. He went out and found the buffalo at the spring, snorting and billowing. The combat, however, did not last long, for after 2 or 3 thrusts with his sword, the animal lay dead at the young man's feet. In a moment, there rose a fiery bird from the buffalo's body, who attempted to fly away. But the eagle, the youth's brother, who had been changed by the sorceress, and who was flying in the air above their heads, darted swiftly down, drove the bird towards the sea, and so wounded it with its beak that in her distress she dropped the egg. It did not fall into the sea, but on a fisherman's little hut, which stood on the shore, and immediately the hut and all around it were in flames. At this moment, there rose from the sea an immense stream of water, which fell on the hut and quickly extinguished the fire. The second brother, the whale, while swimming that way, had also been able to assist the youth by squirting up the water, as whales do. No sooner was the fire extinguished than the young man searched among the embers for the egg, and luckily found it, safe and perfect. It had not melted, but the sudden rush of the cold water had broken the shell, and he could easily remove the crystal ball. The youth went immediately to the sorcerer and held the ball before him. "My power is now destroyed," he said, "and you are the king of the castle of the golden sun. You can also restore your brothers to their natural forms whenever you like." The young man, on hearing this, hastened to the princess, and on entering her chamber, she stood before him in the full blaze of her beauty. Then, with joyful hearts, they exchanged rings with each other and swore eternal love. was once a man and his wife who had only one child, and they lived in a far-away pleasant valley quite alone. It happened one day that the mother went into the wood to gather fir twigs, and she took her little son Hans with her. It was in the springtime, and the boy, who was about 2 years old, ran about the wood and plucked the many-colored flowers in all the happiness of childhood. Suddenly, there sprang out upon them from the bushes 2 robbers. They seized the mother and the child and carried them away into the depths of the forest, in which from year to year no human being ever penetrated. In vain, the poor woman entreated the robbers to let her and her child go. They had hearts of stone and would not listen to her prayers, but led them both away. After dragging them through dust and thorn bushes for nearly 2 hours, they came to a rock in which there was a door, and the robber knocked. It was very quickly opened, and after passing through a long dark passage, they came into a large cave, which was lighted by a fire burning on the hearth. On the sides of the cave hung swords and daggers and other instruments which glittered in the firelight. And in the middle stood a black table, at which sat 4 other robbers gambling, and one of these was the robber chief. He came forward when he saw the woman, addressed her kindly, and told her to be at peace and without anxiety, for that no one should hurt her in this cave. All he required her to do was to take care of the housekeeping for them, and if everything was kept in order, her position would not be so bad after all. Then they gave her something to eat, pointed to a bed in which she and her child could sleep. Now the woman remained for many years with the robbers, while Hans grew tall and strong. His mother told him stories, taught him to read from an old book of chivalry, which she had found in the cave. When Hans was about 9 years old, he made himself a good strong club from a fir branch and hid it behind his bed. He then went to his mother and said, "Dear mother, do tell me just once where my father is. I want to see him so much." But his mother was silent. She would not tell him. because she feared it would create in him a longing for home. And she knew the wicked robbers not let him go away from the cave. Yet she felt heartbroken to think that Hans could not go to his father. That night, when the robbers came home from their maraudering, Hans fetched his club, and placing himself before the robber chief, he exclaimed, "I want to know where my father is. And if you won't tell me, I will knock you down." The chief just laughed, gave Hans such a box on the ear that he rolled under the table like a ball. Hans got up quickly without a word, but he thought to himself, "I will wait another year before I ask again. I shall manage better next time." The year passed away, and Hans prepared himself for another attempt. So he fetched his club, whisked off a little dust from it, and examining it carefully, said, "It is a brave, clever little club." At night, the robbers came home in good spirits, for they brought with them such a large booty that at supper they drank a great deal of wine, bottle after bottle, till at last their heads began to droop, and their eyes to be heavy. Then Hans took up his club, and standing boldly before them asked again where his father was. The chief gave him such a tremendous box on the ear that he rolled quite under the table, but he was up again in a moment and struck such rapid blows right and left amongst them all, which they were too tipsy to resist, and he very soon had them on the ground, unable to move arm or leg. His mother stood in the corner watching him, full of wonder at her boy's bravery and strength. When his work was finished, he went to his mother and said, "I have been in earnest this time, and now I must know where my father is." "Dear Hans," she replied, "we will go and search till we find him." They took the key of the long passage leading to the door from the pocket of the chief, and Hans fetched a great flour sack, into which they packed gold and silver, and many other beautiful things which they found, till the bag was full, and then the boy took it on his back. when they left the cave, the change from the darkness almost put out his eyes. But presently he got used to the daylight and the green wood, the bright flowers, the song of the birds. The glorious sun shining in the sky delighted the boy's heart. He stood looking around him with astonishment, as if he could not understand it. But his mother led him away. For around 2 hours they wandered about before they could find the road to their cottage. At last, they arrived, fortunately, at the lonely valley, and there it stood before them, and the father of Hans was sitting at the door. When he recognized his wife and heard that Hans was his son, he wept for joy, for he had long supposed that they were both dead. Hans, however, although he was only 12 years old, was a head taller than his father. They went together into the little room, but as soon as Hans laid the sack on a bench, the walls of the house began to crack. The bench broke first, and then the floor, so that the heavy sack sank through into the cellar below. "Bless me," cried the father. "What are you doing, Hans? Why is the house falling about our ears?" "Never mind, father," said the youth. "Don't let any gray hairs grow over that trouble. There is in my bag more than enough to pay for building a new house. As it seemed dangerous to remain in the old house, Hans and his father quickly began to build a new one. Then they had cattle to purchase and land to buy, and housekeeping to provide. So they had plenty to do. Hans cultivated the fields, and when he followed the plough and guided it through the ground, the oxen had scarcely any weight to draw. He was so strong. The next spring, Hans asked his father to keep the money he had brought from the robber's cave, and said that all he wanted was a heavy walking stick to take with him on his travels, as he intended to visit distant lands. The wished-for walking stick was soon ready, and Hans quitted his father's house and journeyed on till he came to a dark, woody forest. Presently, he heard a cracking of branches in one of the trees, and looking up, he saw a great overgrown fellow winding and twisting a cord round a fir tree and bending the tree as if it had been a willow twig. "Hi," cried Hans. "What are you about up there?" "Oh," replied the man, "I gathered the twigs yesterday, and now I mean to pull down the whole tree." "I like that," thought Hans. "He has plenty of strength, I see." So he called out to him, "Leave the tree alone and come with me." The man clambered down at this request, and when he stood by Hans, he was a head taller, although Hans was a big fellow himself. "You should be called Fur Twister," said Hans, as they went away together. After traveling some distance, they heard such violent knocking and hammering that at every stroke the earth trembled, and as they walked, they saw an enormous rock, before which stood a giant, striking off large pieces of rock with his fist. Hans asked him what he was doing, and he replied, "When I want to sleep at night, the bears and wolves and all sorts of wild animals come sniffing and yelping around me, and they will not let me close my eyes. So, I am going to make a cave in this rock, that I may lie at night in peace." "This fellow may suit me," thought Hans. So he said, "Leave your house building and go with me, and you shall be called Rock Splitter." The man was quite willing, so the three rambled on through the wood together, and wherever they came, the wild animals fled in terror from their path. One evening, they saw before them an old forsaken castle on a rising ground, up which they ascended, and entering the great hall, they laid themselves down and slept. The next morning, Hans went out into the garden, which was quite a wilderness full of thorns and briars. And suddenly, from amidst the brushwood, a wild boar sprung upon him Hans lifted his staff and with one blow laid him dead at his feet. Then he took the dead animal on his shoulder and carried him into the castle. They roasted a portion of the flesh for dinner and enjoyed themselves, feeling quite content, for they had now sufficient food to last for some time. After this, they agreed among themselves that two should go out hunting every day, and each take it in turns to stay at home and cook their meals. The first day, the fur twister remained at the old castle, while Hans and the rock splitter went to hunt. While the fur twister was in the kitchen, busy at his cooking, there came a little weathered-up old man to the castle and demanded meat. "Be off, you little scamp," he cried. "You will get no meat from me." To the astonishment of the fur twister, the little insignificant-looking old man sprang upon him, and before he could prevent him, beat him so terribly that he fell to the ground and gasped for breath. But the little man did not go away till he had vented his rage upon him. When the two others returned home, the fur twister did not tell them of the little man, nor the dreadful thrashing he had given him. He thought, when they remain at home, they must take their chance with the little wretch, as well as I. And this thought gave him great pleasure. The following day, the rock splitter remained at home. The same visitor made his appearance. When the little man found the meat again refused, he attacked the rock splitter in the same way and beat and overpowered him as he had done the other. At last, the day came for Hans to stay at home, and though the others knew what he would have done to endure, they both remained silent and thought Hans ought to taste the soup as well as they. Hans was very busy preparing the dinner in the kitchen, not expecting any visitors. Presently, as he stood skimming the pot at the fire, in walked the little man, demanded at once a piece of meat. The poor little wretch is hungry, thought Hans. I will give him my share, that the others may not come short. So He offered him a piece of meat. As soon as the dwarf devoured it, he asked for more. And the good-natured Hans gave him some a second time and said, "This is a beautiful piece, and you must be contented with it." But the dwarf asked for a third supply, and when Hans refused, the wicked little wretch was just going to spring upon him and serve him as he had served the other two. But he was mistaken this time. Hans, without much exertion, gave him 2 such severe cuts that he rushed down the steps of the castle in surprise and fright. Hans, in his haste to run after him, fell down and rolled over and over, so that he lost time. And when he had recovered himself, the dwarf was far away. Hans followed him, however, quickly, and saw him slip into a rocky cave. So after taking particular notice of the place, he returned home. The other two, when they reached the castle, were astonished to see Hans quite well and unhurt. But he told them all what had happened. Then they could not any longer be silent about the dwarf's visits and how he had treated them all. Hans laughed, and he said, "It served you right. Why should you have been so greedy with your meat? But still, it is too bad to think that such great fellows as you should have been thrashed by a dwarf." However, they all determined to punish the little wretch. Now they knew where to find him. So they took a large basket and a strong cord and went to the cave in the rocks, into which the dwarf had slipped. They first let Hans down by a rope in a basket with his club staff, and when he reached the ground, he saw a door which he opened, and in a kind of room sat a most beautiful young lady, more beautiful than Hans had ever seen. And near her stood the dwarf, grinning at him like a baboon. The poor young lady was bound with fetters, and she looked at Hans so sadly that he was touched with pity for her and thought, must free her from the power of this wicked dwarf. He turned quickly, and with one stroke of his heavy walking staff, the little wretch fell to the ground, dead. Immediately the fetters dropped from the maiden, and Hans was enraptured with her beauty. She told him that she was a king's daughter who had been stolen from her home by a wicked count, and by him made a prisoner in this rocky cave, with the dwarf to keep guard over her. And terribly he oppressed and tormented her. Upon hearing this, Hans placed the maiden in the basket and called to his companions to draw her up. The basket came down again, but Hans did not quite trust his fellow travelers. For, thought he, they have been already false in not telling me of the dwarf's visits, and who knows, they may have some design against me. So he placed his heavy staff in the basket, and it was fortunate for him that he did so, for when the basket was halfway up, they let go the cord, and if Hans had really been sitting in it, he must have been dashed to pieces. It was, however, still a sad difficulty for him to get out of that deep place, and ponder as he might, there seemed no way of escape. It is very hard, he said to himself, to know that I must stay here and be starved. But as he wondered, he came again to the room in which the young lady had been sitting, and saw on the finger of the dead dwarf a ring, sparkling and glittering. He drew off the ring and placed it on his own finger, and as he turned it round, he suddenly heard a rushing sound over his head. He looked up and saw a spirit of the air hovering over him, who said he was his master, and asked him what his commands were. Hans felt at first quite bewildered, but on saying he wished to be drawn up out of that cave, in a moment he was obeyed, and it appeared to him as if he flew. When he reached the top, none of his companions were to be seen, and on going to the old castle, he found it empty. The fir twister and the rock splitter had gone away and taken the beautiful lady with them. Hans directly turned his ring on his finger, and the spirit of the air appeared and told him that his two companions were on the sea. Hans ran with all his might down to the seashore and was just in time to see at a distance a boat in which his false companions were rowing away as fast as they could. In his violent rage, and without a thought, he jumped into the water, still carrying his heavy staff, and attempted to swim after them. The weight of his staff dragged him down, and he was on the point of sinking when he thought about the ring. The moment he turned it around, the spirit of the air appeared and carried him with the speed of lightning to the boat. He sprang in, and with 2 or 3 blows of his staff, he gave his false companions the reward they deserved, and threw them into the water. He then rowed away quickly with the princess, whom he had twice rescued, and on reaching the shore, he at once took her home to her father and mother, who were full of joy at finding her still alive and well. And Hans married that beautiful princess and lived ever after in the greatest happiness. Once upon a time, there reigned a king in Colchester, valiant, strong, wise, and famous as a good ruler. But in the midst of his glory, his dear queen died, leaving him with a daughter just touching woman's estate. And this maiden was renowned far and wide for beauty, kindness, and grace. Now, strange things happen, and the King of Colchester, hearing of a lady who had immense riches, had a mind to marry her, though she was old ugly, hook-nosed, and ill-tempered. And though she had, furthermore, a daughter as ugly as herself, none could give the reason why. But only a few weeks after the death of his dear queen, the king brought this loathly bride to court and married her with great pomp and festivities. Now, the very first thing she did was to poison the king's mind against his own beautiful, kind, gracious daughter, of whom, naturally, the ugly queen and her ugly daughter were dreadfully jealous. Now, when the young princess found that even her father had turned against her, she, of course, grew weary of court life and longed to get away from it. So, one day, happening to meet the king alone in the garden, she went down on her knees and begged and prayed him to give her some help and let her go out into the world and seek her fortune. To this the king agreed and told his consort to fit the girl out for her enterprise in proper fashion. But the jealous woman only gave her a canvas bag of brown bread and hard cheese with a bottle of small beer. Though this was but a pitiful dowry for a king's daughter, the princess was too proud to complain. So she took it, returned her thanks, and set off on her journey through woods and forests, by rivers and lakes, over mountain and valley, and at last she came to a cave, at the mouth of which, on a stone, sat an old man with a white beard. "Good morrow, fair damsel," he said. "Whither away so fast?" "I go to seek my fortune," said she. "I see. And what hast thou for dowry, fair damsel?" he said. "In thy bag and bottle?" "It is bread and cheese and small beer," she said, smiling. "Will it please you to partake of either?" "With all my heart," he said. And when she pulled out her provisions, he ate them all, nearly all by himself. But once again she made no complaint, but bade him eat what he needed. Now, when he had finished, he gave her many thanks and said, "For your beauty and your kindness and your grace, take this wand. There is a thick, thorny hedge which seems impassable, but strike it thrice with this wand, saying each time, 'Please, hedge, let me through,' and it will open a pathway for you. Then, when you come to a well, sit down on the brink of it. Do not be surprised at anything you may see, but whatever you are asked to do, that you must do." So saying, the old man went into the cave, and she went on her way. After a while, she came to a high, thick, thorny hedge. When she struck it 3 times with the wand, saying, "Please, hedge, let me through," it opened a wide pathway for her. So, then she came to the well, on the brink of which she sat down, and no sooner had she done so than a golden head without any body came up through the water, singing as it came, "Wash me and comb me, lay me on a bank to dry, softly and prettily to watch the passers-by." "Certainly," she said, pulling out her silver comb. Then, placing the head on her lap, she began to comb the golden hair. When she had combed it, she lifted the golden head softly and laid it on a primrose bank to dry. No sooner had she done this than another golden head appeared, singing as it came, "Wash me and comb me, lay me on a bank to dry, softly and prettily to watch the passers-by." "Certainly," said she, and after combing the golden hair, she placed the golden head softly on the primrose bank beside the first one. Then came a third head out of the well, and it said the same thing, "Wash me and comb me, lay me on a bank to dry, softly and prettily to watch the passers-by." "With all my heart," said she graciously, and after taking the head on her lap and combing its golden hair with her silver comb, there were 3 golden heads in a row on the primrose bank. And as she sat down to rest herself and looked at them, they were so quaint and pretty. And as she rested, she cheerfully ate and drank the meager portion of brown bread, hard cheese, and small beer, which the old man had left for her. Then the first head spoke. "Brothers, what shall we weird for this damsel who has been so gracious unto us?" "I weird her to be so beautiful that she shall charm everyone she meets." "And I," said the second head, "weird her a voice that shall exceed the nightingale's in sweetness." "And I," said the third head, "weird her to be so fortunate that she shall marry the greatest king that reigns." "Thank you with all my heart," said she. "But don't you think I had better put you back in the well before I go on? Remember, you are golden, and the passers-by might steal you." To this they agreed, so she put them back. And when they had thanked her for her kind thought and said goodbye, she went on her journey. Now, she had not traveled very far before she came to a forest where the king of the country was hunting with his nobles. And as the gay cavalcade passed down the glade, she stood back to avoid them. But the king caught sight of her and drew up his horse, fairly amazed at her beauty. "Fair maid," he said, "who are you, and whither you go through the forest alone?" "I am the King of Colchester's daughter, and I go to seek my fortune," said she, and her voice was sweeter than the nightingale's. Then the king jumped from his horse, being so struck by her that he felt it would be impossible to live without her. And falling on his knee, begged and prayed her to marry him without delay. And he begged and he prayed so well that at last she consented. So, with all courtesy, he mounted her on his horse behind him, and, commanding the hunt to follow, he returned to his palace where the wedding festivities took place with all possible pomp and merriment. Then, ordering out the royal chariot, the happy pair started to pay the King of Colchester a bridal visit. And you may imagine the surprise and delight with which, after so short an absence, the people of Colchester saw their beloved, beautiful, kind and gracious princess return in a chariot all gemmed with gold, as the bride of the most powerful king in the world. The bells rang out, drums beat, the people huzzaed, and all was gladness, save, of course, for the ugly queen and her ugly daughter, who were about to burst with envy and malice. For the despised maiden was now above them both, and went before them at every court ceremonial. So, after the visit was ended, the young king and his bride had gone back to their own country to live happily ever after. The ill-natured princess said to her mother, the ugly queen, "I also will go into the world and seek my fortune. If that drab of a girl with her milking ways got so much, what may I not get?" And so her mother agreed, and furnished her forth with silken dresses and furs, and gave her as provisions sugar, almonds, sweetmeats, every variety, and besides a large flagon of Malaga sack. Altogether, a right royal dowry. Armed with these she set forth, following the same road as her stepsister. Thus, she soon came upon the old man with a white beard, who was seated on a stone by the mouth of a cave. "Good morrow," said he. "Whither away so fast?" "What's that to you, old man?" she replied rudely. "What hast thou dowry in bag and bottle?" he asked quietly. "Good things, with which you shall not be troubled," she answered pertly. "Wilt thou not spare an old man something?" he said. Then she laughed. "Not a bite, not a sup, lest they should choke you, though that would be a small matter to me," she replied with a toss of her head. "Then ill luck go with thee," remarked the old man, as he rose and went into the cave. So she went on her way, and after a time came to a thick, thorny hedge, seeing what she thought was a gap in it, she tried to pass through. But no sooner had she got well into the middle of the hedge than the thorns closed in around her so that she was all scratched and torn before she got away. Thus, streaming with blood, she went on to the well, and seeing water, sat on the brink, intending to cleanse herself. But as she dipped her hands, up came a golden head, singing as it came, "Wash me and comb me, lay me on the bank to dry, softly and prettily to watch the passers-by." "A likely story," said she. "I'm going to wash myself." And with that, she gave the head such a bang with her bottle that it bobbed below the water. But it came up again, and so did a second head, singing as it came, "Wash me and comb me, lay me on the bank to dry, softly and prettily to watch the passers-by." "Not I," scoffed she. "I'm going to wash my hands and face and have my dinner." So she fetched the second head with a cruel bang, and both heads ducked down in the water. But when they came up again all draggled and dripping, the third head came also, singing as it came, "Wash me and comb me, lay me on the bank to dry, softly and prettily to watch the passers-by." By this time, the ugly princess had cleansed herself, and, seated on the primrose bank, had her mouth full of sugar and almonds. "Not I," said she. "I am not a washerwoman nor a barber. So take that for your washing and combing." And with that, having finished her sack, she flung the empty bottle at the three heads. But this time, they didn't duck. They looked at each other and said, "How shall we weird this rude girl for her bad manners?" Then the first head said, "I weird that to her ugliness shall be added blotches on her face." And the second head said, "I weird that she shall ever be hoarse as a crow, and speak as if she had her mouth full." Then the third head said, "And I weird that she shall be glad to marry a cobbler." Then the three heads sank into the well and were no more seen. And the ugly princess went on her way. But lo and behold, when she came to a town, the children ran from her ugly botched face, screaming with fright. And when she tried to tell them that she was the King of Colchester's daughter, her voice squeaked like a corncrake, was hoarse as a crow's, and folk could not understand a word she said, because she spoke as if her mouth was full. Now, in the town, there happened to be a cobbler who had not long before mended the shoes of a poor old hermit, and the latter, having no money, had paid for the job by the gift of a wonderful ointment that would cure blotches of the face, and a bottle of medicine that would banish any hoarseness. So, seeing the miserable, ugly princess in great distress, he went up to her and gave her a few drops of his bottle. And then, understanding her rich attire and clearer speech, that she was indeed a king's daughter, he craftily said that if she would take him for a husband, he would undertake to cure her. Anything, sobbed the miserable princess. And so they were married, and the cobbler straightway set off with his bride to visit the King of Colchester. But the bells did not ring, the drums did not beat, and the people, instead of huzzahing, burst into loud guffaws at the cobbler in leather and his wife in silks and satins. As for the ugly queen, she was so enraged and disappointed that she went mad and died. Whereupon the king, really pleased at getting rid of her so soon, gave the cobbler £100 and bade him go about his business with his ugly bride, which he did contentedly, for £100 means much to a poor cobbler. So they went to a remote part of the kingdom and lived unhappily for many years, he cobbling shoes and she spinning the thread for him. In a great palace by the sea, there once dwelt a very rich old lord, who had neither wife nor children living, only one little granddaughter, whose face he had never seen in all her life. He hated her bitterly, because at her birth his favorite daughter died, and when the old nurse brought him the baby, he swore that it might live or die as it liked, but he would never look on its face as long as it lived. So he turned his back and sat by his window looking out over the sea and weeping great tears for his lost daughter, till his white hair and beard grew down over his shoulders and twined round his chair and crept into the chinks of the floor, and his tears, dropping onto the window ledge, wore a channel through the stone and ran away to a little river to the great sea. Meanwhile, his granddaughter grew up with no one to care for her or clothe her. Only the old nurse, when no one was by, would sometimes give her a dish of scraps from the kitchen or a torn petticoat from the rag bag, while the other servants of the palace would drive her from the house with blows and mocking words, calling her tattercoats and pointing to her bare feet and shoulders, till she ran away, crying, to hide among the bushes. So she grew up with little to eat or to wear, spending her days out of doors. Her only companion, a crippled gooseherd, who fed his flock of geese on the common. And this gooseherd was a strange, merry little chap. And when she was hungry or cold or tired, he would play to her on his little pipe, so well that she forgot all her troubles and would fall to dancing with his flock of noisy geese for partners. Now, one day, people told each other that the king was traveling through the land and was to give a great ball to all the lords and ladies of the country in the town nearby, and that the prince, his only son, was to choose a wife from amongst the maidens in the company. In due time, one of the royal invitations to the ball was brought to the palace by the sea, and the servants carried it up to the old lord, who still sat by his window, wrapped in his long white hair and weeping into the little river that was fed by his tears. But when he heard the king's command, he dried his eyes and bade them bring shears to cut him loose, for his hair had bound him a fast prisoner, and he could not move. And then he sent them for rich clothes and jewels, which he put on, and he ordered them to saddle the white horse with gold and silk, that he might ride to meet the king. forgot that he had a granddaughter to take to the ball. Meanwhile, Tattercoat sat by the kitchen door weeping, because she could not go see the grand doings. And when the old nurse heard her crying, she went to the lord of the palace and begged him to take his granddaughter with him to the king's ball. But he only frowned and told her to be silent, while the servants laughed and said, "Tattercoats is happy in her rags. Let her be. It is all she is fit for." A second, then a third time, the old nurse begged him to let the girl go with him. But she was answered only by black looks and fierce words, till she was driven from the room by the jeering servants with blows and mocking words. Weeping over her ill success, the old nurse went to look for Tattercoats, but the girl had been turned from the door by the cook and had run away to tell her friend the gooseherd now how unhappy she was, because she could not go to the king's ball. Now, when the gooseherd had listened to her story, he bade her cheer up and proposed that they should go together into the town to see the king and all the fine things. And when she looked sorrowfully down at her rags and bare feet, he played a note or two upon his pipe, so gay and merry that she forgot all about her tears and her troubles. And before she knew it, the gooseherd had taken her by the hand, and she and he and the geese before them went dancing down the road toward the town. "Even cripples can dance when they choose," said the gooseherd. Before they had gone very far, a handsome young man, splendidly dressed, riding up, stopped to ask the way to the castle where the king was staying. And when he found that they were two going thither, he got off his horse and walked beside them along the road. "You seem merry folk," he said, "and will be good company." "Good company indeed," said the gooseherd, and played a new tune. It was a curious tune, and it made the strange young man stare and stare and stare at Tattercoats till he couldn't see her rags, till he couldn't, to tell the truth, see anything but her beautiful face. Then he said, "You are the most beautiful maiden in the world. Will you marry me?" Then the gooseherd smiled to himself and played sweeter than ever. But Tattercoats laughed. "Not I," said she. "You would be finely put to shame. And so would I be if you took a goose girl for your wife. Go and ask one of the great ladies you will see tonight at the king's ball. Do not flout poor Tattercoats." But the more she refused him, the sweeter the pipe played, and the deeper the young man fell in love, till at last he begged her to come that night at 12 to the king's ball, just as she was, with the goose herd and his geese, in her torn petticoat and bare feet, and see if he wouldn't dance with her before the king and the lords and the ladies, and present her to them all as his dear and honored bride. Now, at first Tattercoats said she would not, but the gooseherd said, "Take fortune when it comes, little one." So, when night came, and the hall in the castle was full of light and music, and the lords and ladies were dancing before the king, just as the clock struck 12, Tattercoats and the gooseherd, followed by his flock of noisy geese, hissing and swaying their heads, entered at the great doors and walked straight up the ballroom, while on either side the ladies whispered, the lords laughed. The king, seated at the far end, stared in amazement. But as they came in front of the throne, Tattercoats' lover rose from beside the king, and he came to meet her. Taking her by the hand, he kissed her thrice before them all, and turned to the king. "Father," he said, "I have made my choice. Here is my bride, the loveliest girl in all the land, and the sweetest as well." Before he had finished speaking, the gooseherd had put his pipe to his lips and played a few notes that sounded like a bird singing far off in the woods. And as he played, Tattercoats' rags were changed to shining robes sewn with glittering jewels. A golden crown lay upon her golden hair, and the flock of geese behind her became a crowd of dainty pages bearing her long train. And as the king rose to greet her as his daughter, the trumpets sounded loudly in honor of the new princess, and the people outside in the street said to each other, "Ah, now the prince has chosen for his wife the loveliest girl in all the land. But the gooseherd was never seen again, and no one knew what became of him. While the old lord went home once more to his palace by the sea, for he could not stay at court when he had sworn never to look on his granddaughter's face. So there, he still sits by his window. If you could only see him, as you may someday, weeping more bitterly than ever, and his white hair has bound him to the stones, and the river of his tears runs away to the great sea.